Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben, and this week I've got with me...
Backlack.
No, we're not starting this early with the stupid criminal names in this. Wait, in King Arthur, Legend of the Sword.
Did you say sword?
I did say sword, or S-word, or sword.
Look, no, my name is Jim, and I am responsible for choosing this movie, or shall we call it a cinematic masterpiece, as we dive further into its mysterious depths today.
Look, I'm not going to give my opinion yet, but based on your tone, you're a cinema terrorist. You enjoy inflicting pain upon others, and you knew what was going to happen when I watched this movie. Let's go. Let's hit that synopsis.
All right, look, this synopsis just tells you my feelings on the film. Read my tone, not just my words, and particularly look at the smile behind my eyes. You all ready for this? Here we go.
We're ready.
So, the good King Uther Pendragon attempts to repel the invasion of the evil sorcerer Mordred, who is attempting to invade Britain with armies, sorcerers, demons, and skyscraper-sized war elephants from a dark dimension. Uther is successful in his defeat of Mordred. However, Uther's brother Vortigern, who is secretly in league with Mordred, is upset about Mordred's defeat, and so he goes to the evil octopus-siren witches who live underneath the city of Camelot to ask for superpowers to defeat Uther. The siren witches say, sure, just murder your own wife and we'll turn you into a demon knight. So Vortigern murders his own wife for the super demon powers and then uses these abilities to kill Uther and his wife. However, he is unsuccessful in murdering their young son Arthur, who escapes in a Moses boat down the river, where he is discovered and raised by some friendly ladies who benefit from his protection when he gets older. The grown-up Arthur has no real memory of his royal past and is instead a street-smart brawler and lad on the streets of Londinium. Meanwhile, Uther's long-lost sword Excalibur mysteriously reveals itself to Vortigern, being seemingly stuck in solid rock. So David Beckham is tasked with the job of getting all of the young men in the kingdom to have a go at pulling out the sword in an attempt to uncover Uther's son, with the intention that Vortigern will kill him once he is revealed. Soon enough, it's Arthur's turn to try pulling the sword from the stone, and much to David Beckham's surprise, he is successful. And with the help of a mysterious sorcerer lady known only as the Mage, he makes his escape from Vortigern to find refuge with the underground remnants of his father's old court. Now, the scrappy bunch of misfits, including Backlack and Goosefat Bill, begin a guerrilla warfare campaign against Vortigern, and they succeed in weakening his hold on the kingdom, but they suffer heavy losses in the process. After a spirit quest and some heist-like shenanigans, Arthur decides to face Vortigern, who kills his own daughter, to once again enter demon mode. But luckily, Arthur can now use Excalibur to also enter a video game-style god mode, which allows him to kill Vortigern and restore Britain to prosperity.
Before I comment on what was just an atrocity, I would like to say this movie was released in 2017. It was directed by Guy Ritchie. Snatch, Sherlock Holmes, Swept Away. Written by Joby Harold, Guy Ritchie, and Lionel Wigram. Starring Charlie Hunnam, Astrid Biggs Frisbee, Jaimin Hunsu, Aidan Gillen, Jude Law, Eric Bana, and, as you mentioned, even though he's not on the Wikipedia page, it'd be a crime not to bring him up, David Beckham. Budget, $175 million. And this is going to tell you everything you need to know. Box office return, $148 million. Honest, unbiased, because you know exactly what you just did, review of this movie. This movie's a mess. This movie is a mess. It doesn't have an identity. It has 7 of them. And it could have been awesome. It could have been so awesome. And there are really cool parts. I hadn't seen this movie. I thought I had not. And I did not realize how deep it went, like full magic. Like full magic. Like more than the standard Arthurian legend does it go magic. And it also goes full Guy Ritchie gangster movie. And unfortunately, in my brain, those two things do not gel.
Look, I think they didn't gel for 95% of the cinema going population, but guess which percent I am? I'm the
The
5% who
0.01, the guy.
I
Like
gotta
Guy
say,
Ritchie had a premonition. Is like someone's going to get this.
and it's
It's going to be
me,
some dude from
okay?
Australia.
It's gonna be this Australian dude, you know, who is just there for it. I gotta tell you, Ben, I'm there for it. I love this thing. I love it so much.
I see the pieces that you love. I see them. I really do. But the CGI action in this, I don't get like motion sickness in films. I felt a little bit ill watching this movie. The CGI fights geographically don't make sense and are just stomach churningly awful. Like like that's all I can remember of the back half of this film. And like, cause okay, go. Why? Tell me what's great about this film.
Look, I just really I love its confidence, you know. I love its confidence. I love its
Yeah.
style. I love the huge swings that this movie takes, you know, just opening the film with skyscraper tall war elephants from a demon dimension. I was just like, thank you. I don't have enough movies that just start
I
with
was okay with
giant
that.
war.
I
So
was still on board.
I also like, you know, it's sure there's this weird mismatch of, you know, the street smart modern Guy Ritchie sensibility with the old Arthurian legend. And that collision of the two worlds is obviously jarring, you know, but I think it's jarring in a delightful way, whereas most people think it's jarring in an off putting and, you know, awful way. And I love Guy Ritchie's style, always have, and to see this sort of strange juxtaposition, you know, it just makes me giddy. It makes me really enjoy myself. So I have a great time with this movie. There's also just like, you know, moment to moment stuff that I really love. You know, I love that idea that even though it's, I guess, silly and over the top, you know, when the idea that there is sort of this dark underbelly to Camelot and there's this creature down there that, you know, can sort of offer you whatever it is you want, but you have to make this huge sacrifice. And it really reminded me a lot of Robert Zemeckis's Beowulf, you know, and the idea of that particular take on Grendel's mother. And this was sort of another version of that. And then, of course, we
Very
sort of saw
Shakespeare as well, like witches and
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea that, you know, there's three, but they're one, and how does it all work? And I think Jude Law, when he goes down and visits with, you know, that creature, he really sells it with his performance. And I think that his scenes down there are actually excellent, you know. So, but that's just one small part of the things that I love about the movie. The other stuff that I really like is, look, this is going to be controversial. I don't care. I love the street smart montage at the start of the movie, which is, you know, the soundtrack title is called Growing Up Londinium, and it is just super cool. Like it's, you know, they direct the heck out of it, but like it's in a way that I just really enjoy, where we watch him grow up, he gets stronger, it's a training montage. And I think the really important thing I need to talk about here is Daniel Pemberton's score. So this is a movie that I have only seen 3 times, okay? Because much as I'm here talking about how much I love it, like I'm also, you know, I'm a cinema person. I can't watch this once a week. Do you know what I mean? Like it breaks certain rules, and much as it delights me, you know, it's not every week. But I tell you what is every week, listening to Daniel Pemberton's score. Like the amount of tracks that he has created for this film that I just think are absolutely outstanding. Some of them even with lyrics, and it's sort of this Celtic kind of, you know, vibe to the whole thing. I just think that this is one of the best scores I've heard, and I listen to it so frequently. And I think a lot of the sequences that I like them so much more because they're elevated by that score, by that music that's going on underneath, which I think is just outstanding. So look, I can talk more about what I like, but just even those things that I've just talked about, were you with me for those bits, you know?
If this movie was Guy Ritchie's Street King Arthur, Great movie. Enjoyable, rewatchable, fun, crime, bantery movie. If he had had his parents killed, he'd been Moses down to the river, and he'd been found by the brothel, raised, and then, kind of come up in the streets not knowing who he was, and then say was found by one of his father's old court, and they kind of re-educated him in the way, but he kept his streets, and his streets is what got him back to being king. That movie I'd watch. That movie I'd watch again and again, because I like Guy Ritchie films. I like Snatch. I like Lock, Stock. I like Rock and Roller for what it is. If I got more of that, and like full anachronistic kind of like London gangster King Arthur, would have been just, I think that's what everyone wanted. That's going into that movie, that's what I was expecting. I didn't know about the deep magic. I expected a little bit with the sword, obviously, but that would have been so good. The score is very good and fits my version of the movie a lot better. Like, the problem was the mishmash. The ratio was it's just wrong, in my opinion. And everyone is trying their hardest on screen, except maybe Aidan Gillen, because he never looks like he's trying hard. But he's always enjoyable to watch. And it's really enjoyable. I think even like the Eric Bana stuff is pretty cool. Like, he was actually in it a lot more than I expected as well. This movie also has, and I've brought it up on other podcasts, one of the worst villain problems I've ever seen in a movie. Like, why is he doing it? Because that's it, man. That's it. Why is he doing it? The answer is because he betrayed and killed his family. They never did anything wrong to him. He just wanted more. And I find that incredibly frustrating in a villain, especially even when we get to the end. He never tries to justify himself. He's just like, I want a big tower. I want to be powerful. I want more. This movie, there's a version of this movie that's amazing. There really is. There really is. And it frustrates me even more because of that.
It's funny, I don't have a problem with the mishmash. Do you know what I mean? I understand why it wasn't successful because of the
Yeah.
mishmash, but I don't really have a problem with it. I think because I love high fantasy, because I love all of that sort of stuff. And I also love the, from the streets aesthetic. And so obviously colliding those two worlds, again, just made me giddy the whole time because I was having such fun. Now, there are parts of the movie where I have less fun. So
Can I
and I
just say,
think
though, like, with the mishmash, just 10% less of one or the other. Like, it just needed to be rebalanced that little bit, in my opinion. It really did. They tried to go
yeah,
100% on both, and I just don't think it worked.
yeah, right. Well, agree to disagree. Hey, so and look, the point
No,
is
I'm right.
90. Well, it doesn't. You pretty much are right because 98% of the world agrees with you on this one. Do you know what I mean? I understand that. I'm under no illusions that we're having a real debate here. I'm just saying I'm down for it. That's all I'm saying.
No, and you know what? I love that you're down for it. Continue what you didn't like.
Right. Well, look, there's something that this movie does which I don't mind at all. It does it about 4 or 5 times, and it's this idea that we do a scene that is functionally exposition, and it's a bunch of characters standing around talking, and then we cross-cut that with either a past event or a present event that is happening at the same time, or a hypothetical future event. But the film does this, I think, at least 4 times, in the space of about 40 minutes of runtime. And I love all of the sequences individually, but watching the same technique over and over again in such a short space of time does actually, really interrupt the flow of the film in particular. And look, the plot's not that difficult to grasp, so you do go along with it. But I just found that technique, to be, like I said, a little bit jarring, and one of those is made a lot worse, which is functionally what I call the spirit quest portion of the film, where he goes to what appears to be some kind of alternate dimension, fights a fair few monsters, while we're still doing this cross-cutting narration technique. And then he kind of comes out the other side. And really it's kind of fun, but it does also just sort of add to the runtime in a way that you go, what did we just do here? What was
The cross cutting is definitely a Guy Ritchie signature, but
Yes.
it's a signature that works a lot better in a gangster movie with many moving parts, with many crews performing things at the same time, or that influenced each other without them realizing it. And you get this kind of cross-cut montage of this happened beforehand, which affected this, and these guys did this at the same time. And the style works with the kind of gangster humorous elements of those films. And you're right, he uses it about 4 or 5 times in this movie, and sometimes just to tell one singular story. He's not cross-cutting between multiple events and things like that. But yeah, it's very much something that he obviously really likes as a storytelling device that feels a little shoehorned in this package, in this film. It made some of the action scenes a bit more jarring. Like, obviously, when you're in a gangster film, the moves are a lot more simplistic. It's a punch, it's a kick, it's a gunshot, those sort of things. In this film, where you've got multi-staged combat of sword fights and arrows and more complex moves, that cutting between becomes upsetting to the eye almost.
Yeah, for me, it was more just that it was a repeated technique. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of sequences that I genuinely love it in. The first one where they're actually, talking to, I don't know, Ruse Bolton, the guard. I think that one's really fun and that works really well. And then we just sort of keep seeing it. We see it again, and we see it again, and we see it again. And I think also because at that point in the movie, the plot and pacing is already suffering a little bit. Once he basically pulls Excalibur from the stone, we do have a bit of a doldrums portion of the film where he's sort of meeting the crew, and I think as well, look, the character of the mage, doesn't particularly gel. And I'm not sure if you know this or it turned up in your research, but that character was originally supposed to be Guinevere. And
That makes
basically,
sense.
it does, but also it kind of makes sense why they pivoted away from that, because once the casting went the way it did and they started to see some of the dailies of the performance, not that it was bad at all, it just wasn't Guinevere in the way that, their chemistry perhaps was sort of working. So they just retooled the character a little bit and backed away from that idea somewhat. But yeah, that whole sort of midsection of the movie, it does suffer a little bit from the pace. And then once we get into the attempted assassination, I feel like the movie finds its way again and sort of carries us through really confidently to the end then.
In a classical hero's journey, basically the sword is that initial call to action, right? Like, it's that kind of like, and the problem is he takes too long to accept. He takes too long to accept that call. Hey, you're not remembering properly. You're not remembering properly. You're not remembering properly. You send you on a quest. You still don't remember properly. You still don't get it. You still don't get it. And like, that's kind of what bogs that bit of the section down, in my opinion. I actually think the sword in general, one of the coolest Excaliburs in cinema. Like, they went hard, and they showed a sword with effect, because a lot of like classic Arthurian legends, they don't show the sword actually doing much except being stronger than other swords. But this gives effect. This has more purpose. And I really did like the little father twist of the sword in the stone was
Mm,
actually his father, who had locked the sword in himself and petrified himself so that
yeah.
his brother couldn't steal it. I thought that was a little clever, little kind of metaphorical twist, like still father handing it to son. And I liked that. David Beckham, not as jarring as I thought. I'd heard about it.
Yeah, look,
It's just such a short bit. I'm just like, it perked me up, honestly. I'm like, it's David Beckham. He's not awful at that. I'm glad they didn't repeat that character later in the film.
yeah.
Good job.
It's not. I mean, look, I had a bit of fun with it in my synopsis, but it doesn't bother me either. Like, he's perfectly serviceable for what he's doing at that
Yeah,
particular moment of the film. It is a little bit like, why? Maybe they're friends or something. I don't know.
they are friends. Guy Ritchie
Uh,
and David Beckham are friends. That's
There
the
you
answer
go.
to your question.
I guess back to what you were saying about Excalibur, like I have sequences in this film with Excalibur that I absolutely love. And then I have
Hmm.
sequences in this film with Excalibur that I really, really don't, you know? And it
Yeah.
just sort of depends on what's going on. Like some of the ones where he grabs it and it sort of creates a shockwave and, and then he starts to take guys out. I quite like a lot of that. But then at the very end, one of the, I guess, points of the movie that I don't really like at all and I don't get much out of is the final confrontation and
Yeah.
climactic duel between Arthur and Vortigern, because it's computer generated, like you said. The camera's sort
There's
of
no
zooming
tension.
in and the camera's zooming in and out. We're very much feeling like a video game cutscene, and it's something where there is no tension, and so I'm not really enjoying that as much as a lot of the rest of the movie, But again, the rest of the movie, there's just sequences that I love. I love the dialogue between the characters. I love the characters themselves. I quite like. I like the lads. I like the lads on the streets of Londinium as they go through and try and do this thing. I actually love the characterization of Arthur. I think Charlie Hunnam is actually really good in this role, and this role could have been something absolutely awful, but the confidence that he brings to the role and the charisma that he brings to the role, I think actually just works really, really well. I'm really here for this version of Arthur.
I agree. Like this, it's almost like this movie was so close yet so far. Um, the I would have preferred that final battle take most of the battle out of it and make it a street scam. Make it something that his upbringing enabled him to overcome the odds he shouldn't have been able to overcome. Like pay off that upbringing. I mean, they do a couple of times in the film, like especially with that escape from Londinium and the people kind of supporting them and the locals getting around them and stuff like that. That's cool. But if they kind of paid that off a little bit as like a they ran a game or a scam on the king almost at the end instead of the big epic fight. The movie didn't need the big epic one-on-one fight. The other fights in between had really hit that quota. um, Charlie's great. He really is. He's charismatic. His presence on screen is enjoyable. You don't look away. The female mage was a little bit boring. She didn't give enough conflict or enough kind of oomph to the party. Like when she got kidnapped to kind of kick off the last act of this film, I actually I kind of didn't notice in a strange way that she when
Mm.
she wasn't there to when she was there.
Sometimes it can be very difficult to play that steely kind of role and make the audience care. And I think that's probably,
Yeah,
what we saw a bit of there. It's like, yeah, it's steely, it's confident, it's strong, but it's also like, what's the character? What's going on? So, and look, one thing that I don't know if you may or may not have known this, but this was planned to be part one of six of a King Arthur story, which was going to focus on different members of Arthur's sort of court and close circle. So they were talking about things like this is the Arthur movie, then we might do a Merlin movie, then we might do a Guinevere movie. And once you kind of, because remember, this is 2017. This is the height of we must have a cinematic universe for every single
franchise universe.
studio and franchise that we've got, right? So let's try and develop one. So I guess this was going to be the Arthurverse, where we sort of had all this going on. Now,
About 4 years
that
later, we could have had a Netflix series that would have really worked.
yeah. But the thing is, like, with that being the thinking, it does actually make some of the characters and some of the decisions here make sense a little bit more when we look at the idea of future planning. Like, Annabelle Wallace's character of Maggie, who is sort of in Vortigern's camp, and is kind of a spy for Arthur. She's got a very small role, but there was a promise there of something more in future
Yeah,
movies. Do you know what I mean? The same could be said of, the mage character. The same could be said of, even Arthur himself. The whole idea of what you said towards the start of this cast, where it was sort of like, is this just the first third of the hero's journey. It's like, well, yes,
Yeah.
we've got 6 movies to tell this in. So yes, this is the first third. And you're right. It does take him an awful long time to respond to that call if we're only dealing with one film. If we're dealing with 6, it makes an awful lot more sense. Now, of course, we're not dealing with 6. We didn't get past 1 because no one really responded to this one in the way that they were supposed to. But I think it does kind of make some of the choices make a little bit more sense when you actually view them in that lens, you know?
And look, that brings up something that we've brought up in a previous podcast that we got questions about. The whole idea of what is a flop.
Yeah.
So this is an internet debate that'll go forever. When I use the word flop, it's pretty simple. It didn't make its money. That's all it means. So when a movie is made, it costs a certain amount of money. Then the general rule of thumb, correct me if I'm wrong, you spend pretty much that amount of money again on marketing. So
yeah, it's between half again to the entire budget again, depending on the scale of the production.
So when a movie's released, it is expected to kind of double itself to be truly successful. But the general public and most movie-going audiences think if it makes more than what its initial cost is without marketing, it's a success. But if it makes less, you have to understand there's hidden money that's not reported here. There is budget that is not mentioned in that production cost. And that movie is not successful and a financial flop. Now, here's the trick. Doesn't mean it's a bad movie. Doesn't mean people don't love that movie. All it means is it didn't make its money, so it flopped. It can make its money later. It can make it money on streaming, on DVD, on spinning out merchandise, on books, comics, TV shows. It could make its money later, but at release, it's a flop. So, this movie's a flop, and going back in time, so was Starship Troopers when it was released.
And look, I gotta say, this is time-stamped and released on the internet, right? So there's gonna be records of this for years to come. I think that while King Arthur, Legend of the Sword is currently not considered a cult classic. So if we're going to do definitions again, cult classic being something that the masses don't understand upon its initial release, but at some point after its release, it develops a legion of loyal fans, which grows and grows and grows very slowly over time. This movie right now, as of this year, not a cult classic. If you give it, I'm going to say 3 more years, the me's of the world who love this thing for all of its flaws and all of its magic and just the whole package, we're going to grow in number. And there's not going to be Arthur Fest, all right? I almost made a joke about that. I'm like, there's going to be ArthurCon, guys.
All right? Give me 2 seconds, will you? Hey, Siri. In 3 years' time, remind me to check if King Arthur Charlie Hunnam movie has become a cult classic.
Okay, I've added it.
Thank you.
Is your Siri Irish? Is your Siri Irish?
She is Irish. She is.
See, this movie's rubbed off on you. I don't think your Siri was Irish prior to watching King Arthur Legend of the Sword.
She very much was. She became Irish after I watched a movie called The Guard. But continue.
Look,
so you think it's going to be a cult classic. I think you're insane, but let's go.
3 or 4 years' time, and I'm going to have some people with me who are like
3.
all about.
You said 3.
All right,
no 4.
Yeah, let's say 3. And I say 3 because that'll be 10 years then after its release, right? 10 years after release. If it's going to get some cult classic energy going on, it's going to be around that mark, So, and
what you really need is the guys that were 10, 12, 13 years old, now in their early 20s going, guys, do you remember that film? That was really cool. That's what you got to hope for.
So also, look, as long as we're saying this, in 3 years' time, internet, you know where to find me. Okay. I'll probably still be here doing this very podcast, and you can drop a comment and be like, Jim, with you, buddy. We also love King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, for all of its glory, It's probably, I'm going to say it. I don't even care what the internet thinks. This is probably my favorite Guy Ritchie movie. I'm just going to say it.
That's it. That's wild. That is wild.
If
I'll
you
take
look
Sherlock
at,
Holmes 2 over this.
That's a good point. I really like the Sherlock Holmes movies as well. That's tough. Maybe I can't say that anymore. I really like it, Ben. You know, I really like it. And I wanted
And
you to
look, you
like
have
it more.
successfully conveyed that. And look, I don't hate it as much as some movies you've made me watch. And I 100% see why you love it. And I see why the 7 other people like you in the world love it too. Your international doppelgangers on every continent. There's one of you. It's the rules. There has to be a gym everywhere. Like this movie too. But to sum it up, it honestly was a disappointment. It could have been great. If I was this movie's father, I would not be going to the graduation. This is
Wow.
like, I'm not claiming this as my son or daughter.
Oh my goodness.
Or whatever they identify as. But yeah, this movie, disappointment.
I'm just here to say I like it, you know, and I think it's fun. I love so many of the sequences, love the score, you know, but I've said all that. Look, before I find out what you've got in store for me on the next one, why don't you tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find us if they would like to partake in more of our hijinks?
Yeah, we're not hiding. We're out there. You can see us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And to do that, you just need to look up Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you go to any one of those places, please subscribe, follow, like, leave a comment. If there's a movie you'd like us to watch, whether you think I'd like it, whether you think Jim would like it, whether you think one of us wouldn't or we both wouldn't, put it in the comments. Say, hey guys, I challenge you to watch this movie. We'll then add it to our Wheel of Adventure, where we spin a wheel when we can't think of a movie to watch, and we watch the movies that you suggest. You can also find us on social media. TikTok, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Instagram, Jim_and_Ben. We post reels, we post stories, we post photos, basically of movies we're watching, have watched, and will watch. Thank you so much to anyone who has already subscribed or liked to any one of those places. We really do appreciate it, and we love to see your comments, so keep them coming. All right. I struggled this week to choose a movie, and I literally chose this movie 2 minutes before we went live together. I chose this movie because I remember really enjoying this movie. I remember this movie making me happy. I remember this movie surprising me for what it was, because it could have been something else. And the movie we'll be watching is a sci-fi parody starring Tim the Toolman Taylor, Sigourney Weaver, and Tony Shalhoub. We'll be watching Galaxy Quest.
Nice. I love Galaxy Quest. I'm here for Galaxy Quest. I already own Galaxy Quest, and I have seen it
you would.
fairly recently. So I look forward to enjoying once again the wonder of the Galaxy Quest.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast this week as we watched, here we go again, King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. And I hope you join us next week with Galaxy Quest. Bye.
Bye.